Hi, I'm Caitlin Rother, and I am an author, and this is The Written Scene.
Hello and welcome to The Written Scene. My name is Adam Greenfield. I am the host, the producer, the engineer, the creator, the fun time guy. No, that sounds stupid. But in this podcast series, if you're new to the show, we talk to writers about path, process. We always have some very interesting conversations and really useful conversations. So if you are a writer, you might learn something, and if you are not a writer, well, you'll probably learn something as well, because it's always fun to learn. So with all of that said, one more thing you may hear, as I've said in previous episodes, the disclaimer, the construction disclaimer, they're doing more today. It's been quiet, but then about 10 minutes before my guest got here, they were drilling. It sounded like concrete, so hopefully they're done for the day. But if it pops up, I apologize. It'll be done soon, hopefully. So, all right, that's it. Our guest today is someone whose name I have known for many years. I've been in this scene for a long time, and I've seen her name, and this is actually the first time we finally get to talk. So, Caitlin, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
It is a vast scene here in San Diego of creators, not just writers, but creators. Would you agree with that assessment?
I'm kind of in my own little world.
Yeah,
but
fair.
I mean, I was a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and so I kind of knew who the other teachers were.
Gotcha,
But
yeah.
I went from being a reporter at the Union Tribune, where I knew many, 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 many people, and my world just progressively shrunk.
Yeah.
Because I was churning out books, like a lot of books, and quickly, and I got burned out. And I got injured, and then I'm in physical therapy, and that's a whole other world. But so anyway, I basically had a very small world, and then
Okay.
COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a teacher at San Diego Writers Inc., I got to know more people. But as I've been seeing lately, as I've been coming out of the COVID shell, yes, I've actually been seeing that there really is quite an underground scene in a way.
Yes.
Because I was looking at your page of all the photos, and I'm like, I don't know a lot of these people, but I do know a lot of these people.
Yes.
So, and some of them are really good friends of mine. So I was like, well, that's interesting. I didn't know. I just didn't know.
Didn't know, yeah. And San Diego Writers Inc. has a lot of them too, and I've noticed that every newsletter I get, it's a new class being taught by someone I haven't met before or seen their name,
Yeah.
So I love that it's growing, but I also see some mainstays in that list,
Mhm.
and it's cool to see, I think. 'Cause
Right.
I think this is a kind of an unknown hotspot for art and writers here,
Mhm.
San Diego.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it when I moved here.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. And I was,
Well, I think it's grown
yeah, okay.
because, I mean, unless this has been going on this whole time and I didn't know it was here,
Yeah.
I'd always kind of got the feeling that there were plenty of people who wanted to be writers. But I think what's happened is because the publishing world has also shrunk and gotten harder and harder to get traditionally published, a lot more people have been hybrid publishing and self-publishing,
Right,
and they've
right.
become more acceptable because
Mhm.
before it was so cliquey.
It was, and it was almost
Right.
risky.
Yeah, and so I mean, I've been pretty much only traditionally published. I self-published a mini memoir called Secrets, Lies, and Shoelaces.
Yeah, that's a fun title.
Well, it has a meaning,
Okay.
but that's actually what I'm thinking about reading from when I do my reading
yeah,
at San Diego Writers Inc.
Yeah.
Next
Okay.
month. So, but I think the reason I didn't really know these other people were probably because they were more in that category. Because the people who are traditionally published, we knew each other, but not so much the other people, just because we didn't meet.
Right. Do you there's also a lot of different kinds of writers here. Do you think that also plays into it? Like, do you know a lot of poets or
No,
memoirists?
yeah,
Like that kind
that's
of
the
thing.
thing. I mean, I've been in several women's kind of networking groups that were all writers, but not all authors.
Mm.
And a lot of the people I used to work with at the Union Tribune, they've gone into public relations, but not into writing. But some of them have, but
Okay.
many of them have just gone into other worlds. So I've had to kind of search out and seek out other people and make new friends in different tribes.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
it's when you work at home alone, you don't meet people. So I have to make an effort to do it, and I'm really trying to do that more and more these days. So
I think that's partly why I do this podcast is
Mhm.
because I all my work, not just the podcasting and the writing, but other work that I do, it's all from home. It's all
Mhm.
here, and if I don't get out there
right,
and interact,
who's going to know you?
exactly who would buy my stuff or read it or listen to it or whatever? If I'm not out there, not just promoting it, but sharing it,
Right,
who's going to know?
right.
Yeah, so
Well, that's good to have people like you out there because you bring us all together.
I hope so.
Well, I think that's your goal, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, that may be more of. I think my main goal is. Well, part of it is a little selfish. I'm trying to learn stuff
well,
as a
I
writer.
figured
but,
I figured there's some of that. To
yeah,
it,
but
too.
but yeah, it's to
That's okay.
to spread the word about not just writing here in San Diego, but writing in general. And to talk about the details of it.
Well, and when you interview other authors, I did a few stories for some now defunct online publication. I don't even remember the name of it, to be honest, at this point. But I got to interview people that I chose. I picked Geraldine
Right.
Brooks, who was
Yeah.
a Pulitzer writing novelist who was coming to speak at the Central Library. Jess Walter, who I loved and had read all of his books. And I got to interview these people on the phone. It was like it was fun.
Yeah.
And I learned things, and I tried not to gush, but that was
Kinda
fun.
hard not to,
It was
yeah.
fun.
Yeah, yeah.
It was good.
I had Matt De La Pena on here,
Uh-huh.
and he's a kidlit author,
Mhm.
and I've loved his stuff for years, and I don't have any kids, but I just love the way he wrote, and when I had him on here, I was like, all right, Adam, calm down. It's okay. He's sitting in your living room. It's all right, So
That's why you make us come
that's
up.
I get to say they were in my living room, but no, seriously, like it's not. I don't want to say it's an honor, but it really is like a pleasure.
Okay.
It's an absolute pleasure to meet people that are not just like-minded, but people I admire.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
So-
that. And I'm happy to be here, and I hope I can meet other people through the podcast.
Well-
So if anybody hears this, please reach out. I just got an email this morning from someone who heard me on another podcast 5 years ago, and now she wants me to be on her podcast. And I'm like, okay, sure, let's talk about this.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. Sometimes it takes a while for people to discover you, even though you've been there the whole time. So.
Right. Normally I go back in time and talk about the past, but before I get to that, I actually want to ask a question about sort of that subject as you were just talking about, and it's something that I think some people might struggle with, and that is validation as a writer from your peers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the struggle is to accept it or to feel good about it or even to celebrate it in a way. Do you struggle with that? Do you find that you're like, you get that validation and you're like, no, but I still have more to
Oh,
do.
no, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bring it
Okay, good.
on.
Yeah. All right.
No, because, okay, so when I was a reporter, you had the immediate reaction from people who either loved your story or hated your story or
Mhm.
hated you, even though they didn't know you. They would send these I would get some horrible emails or voicemails because they didn't really think of me as a person
Yeah.
unless I called them back. And then suddenly they stopped being so argumentative or nasty
Right.
and became people because guess what? I'm a person reading this or hearing this. And you're
Mhm.
not just sending it into the ether.
Right.
But it was immediate gratification or feedback or reaction. And I missed that as an author. So, my first book came out, Poisoned Love, about the Kristen Rossum murder story, which was huge here in town. And it's to date my best-selling book ever.
Oh, cool.
But I had so much feedback from that. And I was like, and I have never been able to match that. And I wish I
Chasing
could.
that dragon, huh?
But so I love people who reach
Okay.
out, and
Yeah.
I love to get, validation and, it's admiration. It's just feedback when you're a writer. I mean, why else do you do it? It's certainly not for the money.
No, well, you're not going to get much. You
You
can
know?
hope for it. You can want that to be a part of it. But
And everyone out there who thinks that's why we're doing this, then you better find something else to do.
All I want to do is I just want to. I don't have to make a lot of money as a writer. I just want to pay bills with writing. And to me,
Right.
there's a difference because I pay my bills now fine, but I have to do podcasting and I have to do other work, and my writing doesn't do it. So I just want to pay this minimal amount of bills with words.
Well, believe it or not, writing doesn't do it for me either
Okay.
because true crime is a shrinking market.
Shrinking.
Yes.
Interesting.
TV, podcasting, huge. Books, no, they shrunk
Oh.
in relation the
To the
opposite
other.
direction
Ah, that's too
because the
bad.
market is saturated with it and people think they know the story. They don't want to read a book. And then there's a whole other thing which I could talk about for half an hour. It is so much harder to write true crime now for so many reasons. And I can talk about it for a few minutes if you want.
Sure, yeah.
This is something that I want people to know because I've started writing crime fiction lately. And people who have read my true crime books are like, "Oh, are you not going to write true crime anymore? Oh, please don't stop." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't want to complain. I don't want to whine. But the problem is, all of the sources that I've had to do my job have all changed, diminished, or disappeared.
Hmm.
So, just to give you an example, there's a book that I started working on recently. It's the first one that even interested me in a long time because the last book that I turned into my editor has been sitting for quite a long time,
Yeah.
and that's why I started writing crime fiction. And it's kind of complicated to go into, but in the meantime, I just didn't even want to. So I started working on crime fiction. I don't even know if that's going to pay at all. I just did it to stay sane.
Yeah.
But I started doing this new project, and the last one was so hard for some of the same reasons. But now it's even harder now. And so this is a case that I've never even heard of until I happened to see on my Facebook's friend's page. She is a producer for Dateline. And she said, "Hey, I've been working on this show for years and now it's going to air tonight." And so I watched it. And I was like, "Oh my God, I've never heard of this case." And it was a murder that happened in San Clemente, which is Orange
Mm-hmm.
County. But these people worked, the doctor who is now in prison for killing his wife, he was in business in Carlsbad. And yet
Oh.
I never saw a story in the San Diego Union Tribune to which I had a subscription.
And he was a doctor?
And he was an IVF doctor. So never heard a word about it. So
Okay.
I didn't even know there was going to be a trial. And then when the trial was over, I didn't know there was a trial until I saw Dateline. So I'm having to work backwards.
Hmm.
I would have gone to the trial. I would have sat and taken notes. I would have observed what was going on because that's
Yeah.
a lot of what I like to do.
Yeah.
It's only 90 minutes. I've written several books from trials in Orange County, but I didn't even know this happened. So in order to write a book and get it published, you also have to get photos. And that's one of the main issues is that you have to have permission from the person who had the finger on the clicker for copyright law.
Got it. Yeah.
And my publisher is very risk averse. They also, in many cases, want a release from people in the photo for privacy reasons.
Wow.
So it's become so hard to get those releases. That's just for the photo release. So if you don't have the photo releases, you can't publish a book. So there was very little news coverage even in the Orange County Register, and there was maybe one court photo. So that means the reporters don't exist anymore because they've all been fired or laid off or taken buyouts.
Right.
The person who covered the trial, I think, was young and inexperienced because I didn't see very much depth to the stories.
Sure.
And there were only a couple of them: opening statements, closing statements, sentencing. You can't. I don't have any information.
There's no story there.
It's not that I used the news stories in my books because I mean I've had an author in particular whose name I will not mention who wrote an entire book based on my 50 news stories of the Kristen Rawson case. And my editor and I were thinking of writing to his publisher and just saying basically he plagiarized the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I do need at least some information so that I have some leads on who to call and what witnesses said what, but there's nothing. And the other thing is there's nothing in the court files anymore because we have a new law that says basically when somebody commits a crime, 4 years later, their convictions, all the stuff in the court file of their history is cleaned out because we want to rehabilitate criminals and I can't get jobs if we know all these bad things that they did.
But don't they have to go through an expungent?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think this is
Really?
just so these trends are
crazy,
happening
yeah.
simultaneously in the courts, in the justice system, in the media. And so there's no photos
Nothing to
that
do
even
there.
exist, let alone me trying to get permission. So I'm having a very difficult time even continuing to do the job that I've been doing.
That's got to be tough.
It's very tough.
Do you think the changes come with good intentions?
The media shrinking? No.
No, I mean, like, well, no, obviously not. I guess I mean more the lack of like pictures and getting the approval of everybody in the picture, like things like that. Do you think that there's
This
good intentions, even though it may not be
No, it's
beneficial?
completely liability
Is it?
issues.
Is it okay? So
It's
they're just a CYA kind of a thing.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And that, yeah, you're right. How do you, what do you write a story about if you don't have all that?
It's not even just that. It's like, and then I also can't get people to talk to me because they want to write their own book, which they never do, or they want to be paid,
Which you
which I don't do because I'm a news person. I'm a
Right,
journalist.
right.
I'm not a TV show. So there's so many things that make my job even harder. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to write fiction.
Your fiction, yeah. Have you thought about writing scripts for like
I
shows
have,
and
yes,
stuff like that? Yeah.
and I have my latest book, Death on Ocean Boulevard, which is about the Rebecca Zahau case in Coronado, has been optioned for TV
Oh,
series.
cool.
So what I was hoping is that I could learn, because I don't get to write write a screenplay, for a limited
Sure,
series. They
yeah.
don't let you do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I thought as a result of this, I could learn how to do it
Mhm.
by working with and giving notes and reading the screenplays and telling them whether they were factually accurate or whatever. I could at least read them, see
Yeah.
what the format is and the structure and the narrative. And I watch a ton of limited series on TV for this very reason. I'd
Okay.
really like to adapt my books to the screen.
Yeah.
Except then, this also is a change. After the whole writers and actors
Yeah.
strikes last year, and that industry has been shrinking too. So now they're not selling limited series scripts so much anymore. They want crime of the week broadcast series. So I'm like, you
what do
just
you
start
do?
doing one thing, and then they change the whole
Change it up on you.
change
Yeah.
it all up on you. So it's really hard to make a living.
Yeah.
You just
on
constantly
crime,
have everything.
Have you thought about? And I'm just throwing ideas out there, so ignore them. And I'm just curious though, because I'm always interested to hear how people pivot, because that's something I've noticed. That
Constant pivot.
it is. One of the areas that I've experienced, and I wouldn't say a lot, is graphic novels.
Mhm.
You know, and I've done enough work at least talking to writers in the comics industry about how to create a script for a graphic novel. But that too is a whole other way of writing.
That's like a comic book,
Yeah, it is.
like
But
a long one.
yes, but I tell you what, it people buy it. That is, I think graphic novels is still
Yeah, my brain doesn't work like
doesn't
that.
work like that. No, well,
I
that's where
grew
you
up with comic books,
Yeah.
but I don't want to write.
You don't want to write for
graphic
comic.
novels.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
I'm
all right.
not.
You
yeah.
don't think that you don't write that way.
I don't write that way. I don't think that way. Yeah.
I'm too wordy for them. I
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can't write that short.
No,
So,
my
yeah.
last book was 150,000 words
Yeah, you
that I
can't do
had to
graphic
cut
novels then, yeah.
43,000 words as quickly as I could on deadline.
That's
was
probably
fun.
like cutting an arm off. I would
It
think.
was brutal.
Yeah, it's not fun. All right, well, let's move away from that then.
Okay.
Let's go back. I'm curious. As a kid, what were the kind of things you were into, reading wise, creativity? Were you reading, writing at the same time, drawing, playing music, anything creative?
Interesting. Okay. Well, both of my parents have PhDs in English,
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
every wall of the house was covered with bookcases of records or books. The entire house. And there was always the stereo was always on, and my father would play classical music, jazz, Broadway shows, and it was constantly on.
Yeah.
So I played the piano. I started taking piano lessons when I
Okay.
was 7, and I didn't like to practice. And if I ever hit a wrong note, the door got slammed, and that's the wrong note. So I didn't really like practicing.
Yeah. That'll ruin it.
7 years later, I stopped taking lessons and I started playing all the time, and I started getting good. But I've always had stage fright, pretty horrible stage fright.
yeah.
So I remember one recital that I did, I just was like frozen. And so, fast forward to here I am, I'm 61 years old, and my partner is a musician, and he's been in bands for like 40 years. And so I met him through his music. I went to go see his band with a girlfriend who was also in the band. Her husband was in the band. So that's how I got to know him. And so over the years, he and I would sing in my living room. He'd play the guitar, and then he convinced me to sing in public, and that was really hard because I have this stage fright. And then play the piano and sing at the same time, which I just never thought my brain could do. But
Right.
over the years, I have
Figured out
learned how
do
to
it.
do that
Yeah.
too. So, I mean, I've come a long way, but I had to get over the stage fright as an author and go on TV and do interviews and podcasts and whatever. So I had to get over that and do speeches.
How did you do that? How did you get over it?
I forced myself.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, for example, I was always very shy. I was an only child and socially awkward, and I was bullied, and I was a tomboy, and the boys were the ones who were bullying me, kicking me and punching me because I was very athletic, and I guess they didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just as good at the sport as they were, and
Why-
they apparently
yeah.
were threatened by
Yeah, well, they were definitely threatened by that.
So,
Yes.
so I was very shy, and I was bullied, and it was hard being me, and so I read. That gets back to
Okay,
your other
yeah,
question.
yeah.
I read a ton of books. And I talked to myself, and I would kind of do voices to myself. And I guess that's kind of how, maybe why it's so easy for me to do dialogue.
Yeah.
Now I just have that in my head. But yeah, I would ride to the library with my backpack and fill it up with books, and I'd make a list, and I'd read the book and check it off. And so I had a feeling of accomplishment.
It's great.
And then I started writing stories when I was young. I took a class when I was at Berkeley, creative writing. And then I took a journalism class when I was a senior. And that was really a whole new thing. And I found out, wow, I'm actually good at this.
Yeah.
I just started learning what journalism was, which is basically how to find information.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. I didn't even think to look. And it's like in the phone book. Wow, you can actually put when there were phone books.
When there were phone books, right?
Um,
For anyone that's under 30, those are...
There's such a thing as
Yeah.
a phone book.
Yeah.
Anyway, but how to get information, how to ask questions. And I really liked it. It was like solving puzzles too. So,
yeah.
I mean, my whole evolution as a writer kind of comes in many different directions.
Okay.
Because what I do is not just writing. I mean, I'm a nonfiction writer. I'm an investigative reporter.
Mhm.
And so a lot of that has to do with research. It also has to do with having the ability of getting people to trust you and asking questions and getting people to tell you things
Be
that they
honest.
never thought that they were going to tell you or that
Yeah.
they wanted to tell you and then they
Yeah.
later regret telling you. I mean, there's many different skills involved in what I do,
Mhm.
other than just sitting down at the computer by myself and hearing a story in my head and putting it on the page,
Right.
which is more what fiction is. But I started out wanting to write fiction, and I didn't really know what I was doing because I was trying to write about crime by reading other crime books, but I didn't know the material well enough to do it myself. And I didn't
Makes
really
sense.
realize what I didn't know until later.
Right. Yeah.
I was lucky enough to have Michael Connolly read my first
Really?
novel. Yes,
Wow, very cool.
because my boyfriend at the time used to be his editor at the LA Times, and we went to a U2 concert together, and he, they were
Yeah,
friends, and so
yeah.
I got to know him. And so I asked, he only does one blurb per author per lifetime.
Really.
So I asked him to do a blurb on Poison Love, my first nonfiction book. He goes, "But don't you have a novel?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but it's not published, and I don't have a publisher for it." He goes, "Well, why don't I read that?" I'm like, I took a big chance because I only had one shot at
Yeah.
Michael Connolly.
Yeah.
So he read it, and he basically said, you do this really great job with developing characters, but I can't give you, I'm not going to put my name on this because people who read my books are expecting a certain level of proficiency with a
Correct,
police
yeah.
procedural, and you don't have that, but you're really good at this. So he gave me a great blurb, which I'm still able to use, and
Yeah.
I'm really proud of it. But he was right because I didn't know what I didn't know until he said that. And now I know what,
Now you know
now
what-
I
now
know
you know.
all of it because
Yeah.
I've written so many true crime books. So now as I'm writing fiction, it's coming so much more easily. And now I do know the material, and now I do know how homicide detectives think and how they talk and what they do and in what order. And so I didn't know any of that.
No. Do you? This is. I don't want to. I'm hesitating to ask this because I don't like asking questions about regret. But
I don't regret
you don't
things.
regret things, no. So I'm curious. Could you see yourself going a different path with writing?
What now?
If you would maybe.
That's the same question as regretting, though.
Well,
Because you can't redo the past.
No, you can't,
You did
but
what
I'm-
you did.
no, you can't. But I certainly I don't necessarily have regrets about how I got to this point, but I probably could have done things a little differently and ended up at a certain point maybe sooner. I don't think I would have.
I wish that. I
Yeah,
wish I'd
yeah, yeah,
known
yeah.
things, but I didn't.
You didn't, right?
And the other thing is, I tried so hard. I
Yeah,
did everything I could. I did the best I could. I killed myself. I hurt my own body trying. I worked so hard.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
can't live like that. I can't
No,
live
it's not worth
second
it.
guessing myself
Yeah.
or regretting anything because I can't do it over.
I'm trying. I think I'm done beating myself up over things. Right now, I'm trying. What I'm working on is not trying to make up for a past. Like
I married an alcoholic with borderline personality disorder. Do you think
you.
I wish I didn't do that?
No,
Yeah,
for
of
sure.
course I do. But I'm never going to regret that because you know what? That experience helped make me who I am and helped get me to where I am.
Yeah, yeah. It probably taught you a fair amount about writing too. I would think. Probably.
No, but it taught me a lot about trauma
Yeah.
and a lot about being a, I don't want to say I was a victim. I'm a survivor. I like to look at it
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But I can talk about domestic violence. I can talk about alcoholism. I can talk about living with someone who killed themselves. I can talk about somebody living with someone who is mentally ill and what that's like. And
Mhm.
if I'm going to write books about people who have killed people for those various reasons, it's really good that I've experienced it myself.
Yeah, that's true, and
So
in
that's
a
the
very
bright side.
difficult way. That is the silver lining, isn't it? Yes, you got to look at it. I
And
guess,
that's
that
how
way.
you have to look at life because how other way is there to get through it,
It's true.
honestly?
It's very true. It's very true. I want to talk a little bit about your how you became a full-time author. Like, I want to talk a little bit about that process because I think, at least for me, it's one of my ultimate goals is to just write for a living or just full-time, constantly writing. So I want to talk about some of maybe the obstacles or speed bumps or things you had to get around to get to that point. Like, what were some of the things that you encountered along the way?
Well, I have always been a very driven and ambitious person.
Okay.
And one of the things that some people may not think this is a good thing, but I don't think I'd be where I am if this wasn't part of my personality. Being an only child, growing up the way I did, I got used to being alone. And if you want to be a successful author, you need to be able to be alone and not running around with friends and running out to parties and drinking and doing all kinds of stuff because it just takes away from your mental energy. It takes away your focus. It takes away your time that you need to have your butt in the chair and literally do the work.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I have always been extremely driven and ambitious, like I said, but that also has then caused many physical problems because I didn't get up and I didn't leave the chair. So I have had to learn balance, both socially and physically. But I still spend a tremendous amount of time alone, and I have to because a lot of writing is thinking, and you can't do that if you're with other people. Sorry. I mean, my partner is very much the opposite. He loves people. He loves going out, and I just don't really need to do that. I like to do it sometimes, but I just don't need that or want that. And the older I've gotten, the less I, really want that. So I have to push myself to go places because I don't want to be a hermit and a recluse But
you also want to make sure that you're focused on your writing as well.
Yeah, you have to be.
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot of time working out and doing exercises to try to stay strong and all that. But, that's one of the reasons I've been able to get to where I am. And people who aren't able to focus like that or don't want to because other things in their lives, I don't have a family really. Didn't have kids.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Not that I didn't want them, but that didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a marriage and that didn't work out. So, I live alone and I have a partner and in a committed relationship, but we both have our time alone, which is what I need. And I need to be quiet and I need to write.
Do you need a entirely quiet space?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I cannot have any noise on.
No. You don't listen to music, none of that. No. Even though you're around music as a kid a lot, you just never.
I was tortured by that music because when I would try to go to sleep, it was too loud and I couldn't sleep and I'd have to come out and ask him to turn it down. And that was like every single night I'd have to ask him to turn it down. And you know what that's like? That's not fun.
No, not at all. Yeah.
And he would be playing the clarinet and the saxophone badly. I didn't like trying to sleep.
Yeah.
Can you turn that down? So I'm not good with music. I'm not good with loud.
Okay.
I'm not
Yeah.
good with crowds. I'm not good with loud.
No, you just need that
I need that
that
quiet
quiet
space.
space. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Have you built up like a little Zen room for yourself, for your writing
That's my
room? Is
house.
that your
It's
house?
my
Your
whole
whole house?
house.
Yeah.
Yeah, except
Okay.
for the construction, which ruins everything.
It
But
doesn't it always? Yeah. I've got plants in here. I've got it's good lighting. And now they're just hammering
yeah,
away
it's
out
very
there.
pleasant in here.
Yeah. It's this isn't always my writing space, but this is half the time my writing space. I also go.
It's so clean. There's no dust. There's no clutter. So I'm wondering if you really work.
I have an amazing girlfriend, and we both split the chores. I also try to clean a little bit before people come here. So
Also, though, I mean, I do research, and I can't. It's not that I'm messy, but it. I got to put it out. I got to
yeah.
have access to it, and I try to put it in plastic boxes and stuff. If you saw my office compared to your office, I've got stacks and stacks of these colored
Color,
plastic
yeah.
boxes to keep the dust off them because I'm horribly allergic to dust.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I have, research that comes in many different ways, and I'm still a paper person.
Are you okay?
I can't do everything on the computer because it hurts me. So I have to be able to take it to another room, change my position. I mean, that's how I'm going to survive.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's how I learned how to extend my writing day is to change what I'm doing and change the position, change the chair, change the,
Yeah.
stretch,
Do you
walk
try to
around the block.
do you try to keep an organized workspace too, or are things
Semi, yeah.
semi?
I mean,
Yeah.
there's stacks, and I have
Right.
to remember where things because it'll be like a single piece of paper that's in this whole stack of single pieces of paper.
Right.
So I try to use a lot of file folders.
Yeah, and you're referencing things in your writing.
It's in my head mostly.
Okay.
Imagine trying to remember.
I can't.
I've
I'm
got
trying to figure out what I did for dinner last week.
I've got book number 15 coming out and number 16. Well, it's not number 16. It's a updated. I'll say the names of them. Body Parts,
Okay.
which is going to be a significantly updated version of a book that I wrote back in 2009
Mm-hmm.
about a serial killer who had sex with women and strangled them until they passed out, and then he gave them CPR to bring them back.
What the?
Oh, he said it was, partly for their enjoyment because of the whole sexual asphyxiation thing when he was torturing them,
Yeah.
really. Anyway,
Yeah, for sure.
and then he couldn't bring them back, so it was an accident when they died. Okay. So anyway, by the third or fourth time, that there's a chance you're going to kill him.
Mhm.
That argument really doesn't work very well. So anyway, he dismembered his first victim, and so she had been unidentified for 25 years because all they found was her torso and then her arm. So they took samples, DNA samples, which they kept,
Mm-hmm.
tissue samples
Mhm.
in the freezer, and her cousin submitted his DNA to one of these genealogical websites with the hope of maybe helping to identify her, and it worked.
Yeah.
So 25 years later, the sheriff's department, where her torso was found, was lucky enough, they developed a DNA profile from her parts
Yeah.
and submitted it to another GED match, which is another one of those websites. And they were able to find the cousin who submitted his DNA to that website. And then they found the sister, and they were able to at least give that family closure. And
Yeah.
give her a name. So her name is Kellyanne Cummings, and we now know that was her name. And I could write 10,000 words about who she was and
Mhm.
what happened to her and how her family looked for her and why all the lengths they went to try to find her. So that book's coming out in February.
Oh, cool.
It was out of
Congratulations on
print. Thank you. It was out of print, and now it's going to be back in print, and back
Great.
in the bookstore.
Fantastic.
And then the McStay Family Murders, which is called Down to the Bone, that's coming out in March, and that is about the McStay family who went missing from their house in Fallbrook in 2010. They just mysteriously just disappeared, and the sheriff's department treated it as a missing persons case, despite the fact that there were all these very odd clues.
Yeah.
They left food out in the kitchen as if they were in the middle of a meal. I don't know how many people just leave
That
in the
is
middle of breakfast.
Just like that, yeah.
Just like that. Didn't tell anyone. Left their dogs outside with no food or water, which they would never do. Left their prescription glasses, left their favorite shoes, So it was a very odd,
Suspicious, yeah.
suspicious situation, but the sheriff's department treated it as a missing person case instead of as a homicide, despite the fact that people told them that this was not right and
Yeah.
this was not how they would normally act and something was wrong.
Right.
So 3.5 years later, the sheriff's department says, oh, no, they voluntarily went to Mexico. We're just not going to pursue this anymore. And guess what? Their skeletal remains were found in the desert about 8 months later. And so another county sheriff's department picked it up as a homicide investigation
Right.
because now they had bodies, or what was left of the bodies. And so the book is about that.
Okay.
But it's also about how the investigations in both counties were flawed and
Seems to be a common
et cetera.
thread, doesn't it? A lot of it, or is it?
Well, I think what's happening, at least what I'm doing more of, is questioning, convictions and prosecutions and investigations.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Rebecca Zahow case, the Death on Ocean Boulevard book that has been optioned,
Yeah.
that one is all about confirmation bias, and so is the McStay case, because that's a claim by the defense in the McStay case and a claim by the Zahow family that these sheriff's departments basically go in with one idea and they don't change their mind no matter what the evidence says. And so that's, explores that whole issue.
I had, do you know Justin Brooks?
Yes.
Yeah, so I had him on the show, and he's also done the reading as well, the Every Prose Has Its Thorn reading, and it's frightening and fascinating what can happen
Absolutely
to people, and just the lack of
there's no punishment for prosecutors.
exactly.
That's part of the problem.
Yeah. There's no repercussions for that.
But so it's coming out more.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I don't know how much more. But, you have to shine a light on it when you see it. I mean, normally I'll write a book about a conviction and it's pretty much that's all there is.
Yeah.
But if I go into a case and I find out that that's not all there is, then I have to write that. So I go into a case with an open mind and I just see what I see.
Are you ever tempted to do your own investigating?
That's what I do. In a situation like this, I have to have a conviction or some kind of court ruling in order to get a book deal.
Yeah.
But after that, I take it where it takes me, and I write what I find. And if I discover things, I make sure I put them in.
Okay.
The problem is the lawyers get involved, and they say, well, has this been made public before? And I say, well, it hasn't been made public. That's the whole point of my book.
Yeah.
That's part of why the book that I've had in that's been sort of stuck. That's partly what's going on.
That's the holdup. Yeah. Do things like the first episode of Serial, or first season of that show Serial, does that bother you that there's no conclusion with court cases like that?
I didn't watch that.
Well, it's
or listen to that, but I've heard of it. Yes.
You know about it.
Yeah, I know about it.
Yeah. Does that sort of thing eat away at you in a way, like that there's no conclusion?
No. I mean, if I get a case, I do my best and I'll show you what there is. I don't have any power. I'm not a prosecutor.
Right,
I have to lay it out, though, and show people what evidence there is. And maybe there will be some public action or somebody will push for something. But I am not an activist or an advocate. That is not my job.
Okay.
I am a journalist.
Yeah.
So I do not take a position. I do not go out and give my opinion, no matter how that frustrates many people. Why don't you tell us what you think? Well, sorry, that's not what I do. That's
someone else's job, yeah.
And some authors do, but they were not trained journalists like me. And there are not that many of us left who think that that's important, but I don't really think that I need to be saying what my opinion is because I can't do anything about it.
Right.
And it doesn't feel right. I have had it beaten into my head by these editors. You're not an advocate. I'm like, because I got in trouble where people thought sometimes I was writing stories
leaning in a little too much.
That they thought where I was acting like an advocate when I really wasn't. I was just reporting from a different perspective. So I'll give you an example. I learned how to be a reporter back east in Massachusetts.
Okay.
When we would cover a protest by union members or by, welfare recipients or whatever, it would be from the person who was most affected. Thus, the people in those jobs and the people who were receiving the welfare checks. I tried doing that at the Union Tribune, and I got in trouble. Oh, no, it's the taxpayers. It's the people who are, investigating welfare fraud that were,
Interesting.
I'm like, well, what about the person who got their welfare check cut and they're already living on the street?
Right.
How about those people?
Yeah.
Isn't that the person? No, you're acting like an activist. I'm like, no, you're just like, got your head in a box.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
To be nice.
That's that's a very nice way of putting it. It's that's got to be tough. I know.
Well, I don't work there anymore,
multiple
so now
maybe
I'm
it's
free.
not that tough anymore. but I know I know multiple journalists actually, and at one point in time I interviewed Noam Chomsky. I had the luck of interviewing that guy. Well, I guess depends on your version of luck. And there was parts of that interview that really frustrated me because I wanted an answer. I wanted a specific answer, but that's not how he operates.
People get frustrated with me when I won't tell them what I think, and
that's just not what you do.
And it happens almost every single time I do an interview. Even if I give them the preface, they still think they're going to convince me to tell them, "Oh, just tell me this one time. It's just us." Okay, no, we're on a podcast.
Right?
No, it isn't just us. No, I'm not going to do it because
don't.
It ruins my credibility. Sorry, not happening.
Well, and it goes against what you believe.
And sometimes I honestly don't form an opinion on purpose because I don't want to be biased. I want to be open.
It would probably taint your writing in some way.
Well, I'm worried that it might, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And in fact, sometimes if you form an opinion, you might overcompensate and go too far the other way. So,
are there things that might be too gruesome or other subjects you won't write about?
Yeah, I don't like writing about serial killers and blood and gore, and
Yeah.
I do not like that. I do not want to write a book that I don't want to read.
Right. Okay.
So I wrote a serial killer book. That I'm not doing another one.
No, it was too much.
It was the darkest 9 months, and so I was happy to give this young dismembered woman, a happy ending, as it were. If you can have a happy ending, at least we know who she was. Her family has closure. That was at least a positive thing that I could do.
Mm-hmm.
So
but
I felt good about that. But the original book, I was in pain for like 9 months. I wrote 2 books back to back. So when I say had physical problems, I just worked really hard, and I was rewriting, and I was sitting at a laptop for too many hours, and I just really messed up my body. And that was after doing 19 years as a newspaper reporter, writing on deadline, writing. One of the things that I did that really hurt me was I took notes on the computer when people were talking.
Oh, yeah.
And I type very fast, and I would write every single thing they said down like a transcript. That was a mistake.
Yeah, I could see that being trouble.
Yeah. So I don't do that anymore. And now I can hardly keep up because I'm just not practiced, and I'm not so fast anymore. And people talk, and they talk fast, and I'm like, can you slow down, please?
Yeah, for sure. I've tried doing transcription, and I know that there's a foot pedal you can use, and there's other little shortcuts you can do, but I don't know. When I write, I write at a computer. I don't write by hand.
It's so hard to write fast enough. And even though I have little abbreviations and stuff that I developed when I was a reporter, it's still really hard. So I still take notes on the computer when I interview somebody.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll just ask someone, repeat that. I didn't get all that quote. So it's no big deal.
And usually they're willing to do it.
Well, they want to be quoted accurately.
Right.
And sometimes I'll go over things with people. I'll go, you know what, I didn't get this. Can we say it again? And so, I was the only reporter at the paper, it seemed, that I would call people back after I interviewed them and wrote the story to make sure that what I wrote still characterized and represented what they said, because I had learned early on that sometimes, people say things and maybe I'll interpret it differently than how they meant it. And even though on its face I was right, they didn't want it to be interpreted that way.
Right.
So I just always learned how to be careful.
Yeah.
And people appreciate that. So that's good, because I wouldn't have lasted in this business as long as I had if I wasn't accurate and I wasn't sensitive to people and I didn't respect what people said, and I didn't go around trying to burn people.
Sure.
You don't last.
No, you don't want to do that.
You can get a bad reputation.
Do you ever get concerned about turning away readers with certain, with maybe too much fact, or, as you're writing your fiction, with a journalistic mind, do you ever wonder if your reader's going to go, okay, let's get to the action, or whatever it may be? Is that ever a concern?
Well, when I was a newspaper reporter and I was writing straight journalism, I was accused of that by some editors. Like, my stories were too dense. Because I had so much fact in them. Oh my God, like that would be a problem. So I learned to be more sensitive to that. And I write narrative nonfiction. I don't write like journalism straight.
Okay.
So I don't write just fact. I try to write scenes. And that takes care of that as much as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, you still are going to have a paragraph here and there of some fact as context, but that's okay. As long as you don't have a big, long pages and pages of that.
Yeah. Do you like to push the boundaries a little bit? Do you,
Of what?
of what you put in, the content wise, or are you just fact? I'm laying it out.
Well, those damn lawyers,
That-
that's what I mean. So
That's the ones, huh?
you've got to have what you write documented.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm very careful about that. And I'm a very intensive, extensive. I've been told, I had this in a review once, I'm either exhaustive as a researcher or exhausting
Is that-
because there's so much research and so many details.
but I think when I work with other clients in podcasting, and we're trying to make cuts to a certain, or trying to get podcasts to a certain length in their episodes, I always say it's easier to cut, just record more. It's easier to cut than to have to go back and add.
Right.
in.
Well, and the other thing is, if there are paragraphs that you're reading over and you gloss over them, you just skip them, the reader will too.
Yeah.
So you should cut those.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
though you like them or even though they're important, go back and force yourself to make them simpler or
Mhm.
just say as little as you need to. So that's one of the things.
Yeah.
Don't write stuff that people are going to be bored reading because you need to be fair to so and so because they gave you their time and let you interview them.
Mhm.
So what? Maybe put in one quote,
Right.
a short quote if that's really an issue. But yeah, you got to let go of that stuff.
And I did stories for So Say We All,
Mhm.
and working through that process and cutting, and there's certain stories where I was just like, yeah, but this is an important thing, and they're like, yeah, but we don't care about that. Like, I understand that's important, but that's not helping the story or moving it along.
I had an editor who used to try to cut stuff all the time out of my stories, and I'd be like, you know what? Just because you don't understand that doesn't mean that we need to cut it. Why don't I rewrite it so that it's
Exactly.
simpler or whatever? Because this is important, and we can't just lose this just
Mhm.
because you don't want to rewrite it and you want to go home early,
Right. Yeah, you're in the wrong job for that.
which happened. By
Yeah,
the way.
yeah.
So,
That probably happens a lot, I would think, for people. What do you think it is that draws authors to their preferred genres?
people or me?
Yes.
'Cause I can't speak for other people. You know, true crime. My partner does not understand. My mother does not understand. I have friends and other authors. They don't want to read my books. I don't know that they ever have. So the people who read my books are generally not people who are my friends or the people who I know because I don't want to, because they think it's going to be something that it isn't. And so
Mm.
they avoid it
Yeah.
because they think they have an idea, a preconceived notion that it's going to be disturbing and it's going to have images that they can't get rid of that they don't want in their brain. And I have to try to explain to them, do I seem like that type of person to you? I
Yeah.
mean, I write the psychological aspects
Mhm.
and I write it as it reads like fiction. It's the same creative techniques as for fiction writing as it is for narrative nonfiction writing. And so
Mhm.
it's going to read like a novel.
Yeah.
And it's not full of blood and gore. There are a couple books that I couldn't avoid that. Like there's a Manson book, which, sorry,
How
but
do you avoid that?
you
with him?
can't.
Yeah.
You can't because
Yeah.
you'd be trying to cover up history and you're not going to do that.
Mhm.
In this serial killer book, I very as few details as possible. Most of the details are about his bizarre proclivities and what a bizarre person he is and all the things that happened to him along the way that made him capable of doing these things.
Yeah.
And then all of the crazy things that he told detectives. I mean, I probably went overboard with that, just trying to show how completely what a messed up guy he was. So to me, that was what was interesting. So I was going to be a therapist when I was in college. That's what I thought I was going to do.
Okay.
And so I took abnormal psychology, and they were playing tapes of these mentally ill people who were just like really out there. And I was like, you know what? I can't live with this every day. I don't want to live with this every day. And so I'm not going to do that. And I went into PR for a few years, and I decided I didn't want to do that either.
That's all other
I went-
psychological problems.
Yeah,
isn't
so
it?
I went back to journalism, but I did a whole 360 because guess what? That's what I end up writing are these people who are
Mhm.
mentally ill or have all these crazy thoughts in
Yeah.
their heads, or they wouldn't be capable of committing these things. But it's not every day, and I take a break and I do other things.
Right, right.
There are many other aspects of being an author that are more than just writing books.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we were discussing before we had the recording on, there's public speaking, there's podcasting, TV interviews, there's, giving speeches and teaching, and I'm a coach.
Okay.
I also
I
coach
think I read that
aspiring
as well.
authors.
Yeah.
I help people develop their stories and shape their stories and help them figure out how to promote their books and, all that.
Okay. So you're pretty well rooted in the writing world.
Yeah, I have been. Had to stop teaching because I couldn't do 3 hours. I was having problems with my voice, and so
Okay.
I just and I got too busy also.
Yeah.
So when you have book deadlines and you have book contracts, that's a good thing. You don't really need to be a teacher anymore, and then you need the time to do the research and to do the writing. And I didn't have time for both, and my voice couldn't take it anyway. So
I've got my August newsletter going out tomorrow, a few days late, but whatever. And the reason it's late is because I have so much on my plate
mm-hmm.
that I live in exhaustion.
Well, that's not good.
No, it's not.
Balance. Take it from me, please. Put
Well,
some balance into your
what
life.
I think what I've learned is that I'm not the kind of person that can do like little bits and pieces of multiple projects at the same time.
And your brain doesn't work like that.
No.
Even though people think they're good at that, they're not.
It's not how
It's
it
been
is.
scientifically proven that
Right.
people are not good at
No.
multitasking.
Finish a project, move on to the next one.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Or
I think
do one or two, but not 5 or 6.
and that's my problem is this month I'm really working on starting a new practice of creative production.
Good.
And that involves looking at my schedule and going, all right, you have too much shit to do. It's time to just focus on one or two things.
Exactly.
And the other things will be fun.
I have a book of lists, and many times I'll do things that are not on the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And is that to avoid doing the things on the list?
It's sometimes just I don't want to do those things, but I write them down so I don't forget that I have to do them.
Yeah.
I mean, this past year and a half, even though it's been incredibly frustrating to have my book stuck, and by the way, it seems like it's coming to a close. I'm happy to report, but I still am waiting to make sure. I have used this time to prevent myself from going insane, and I have directed that energy into writing fiction. So I have finished a book, written a book, and now I'm halfway through the next book. So
Wow,
3 books in less than a year. I think that's pretty good. A pretty good way of diverting
I think it is.
frustration and anger
Yeah.
into something productive. And I've been working on my internal body things and the external body. You get old, you have things that break down and hurt and get sore, and you have to go learn to new ways of taking care of your aging body and changing your diet. And so I've actually gotten healthier. Even though it's been stressful, I've been working on my health. I've been working on my mental well-being. And in a weird way, I've managed to use this time, by hook or by crook for good things.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think a lot of people talk much about the mental health of writers. That's something that I would love to, and I'm far from a therapist. I have my own, thank you. And I've considered creating this like monthly group on Zoom of people to just, first hour we talk about things that are bothering us. The second hour we talk about things that are exciting us, and all about writing. Because I have a chat with a few writer friends, Leslie Ferguson, Kelly Bowen, and Hillary Broman, and we talk about some of the hard things about being a writer. It's like I've got a string of rejections. I'll get that acceptance, but I've got a string of rejections and it really sucks. Like those sorts of things, or finding an agent, or the editing process and things like that. And a lot of that over time, I think, really eats away at how good we feel about what we're doing.
It does if you let it. And that's all I can say is I have been tested like I've never been tested. And I've got, my 15th book coming out.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's not like it's any easier than it was before. It's just different. But I've learned I now have a successful track record behind me. I have to keep remembering that because I've been in the stage where I didn't have that yet. And then I wondered, is this just a vanity exercise? Is this for nothing? Am I just fooling myself? Have I just wasted? Because it took me 15 years to get my first book published.
Wow. Yeah.
The book that I started writing first took me 17 years to get published. That was a novel. So I thought I was going to be a novelist. That's what I wanted to do. And I couldn't get it published. I rewrote it 1,000,000 times. And then it was book number 4. And so the books that I've been writing, it has the same detective, but it's like a new series because it has a female main character as well, and
Okay.
they work together. And
Yeah.
so that's like it's a new series as far as I'm concerned, moving ahead. And so
Yeah.
I'm now on the third one in that new series. And if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't know what to do differently this time. And I wrote the second book in 2.5 months. I hurt myself. I couldn't write
Yeah.
for weeks or months. I ended up injuring myself because that's how silly I am. Dictation software is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, but in order to not go insane and to stop being angry and frustrated, all those things, about the whatever rejection or disappointment, that you just have to learn how to keep going
yeah.
and be resilient. And that is the main thing you have to just keep telling yourself. As long as you're not doing it in vain, as long as you have as long as you know you have talent and you have ambition and you want it more than anything in the world, because if you don't, you're not going to make it.
Right.
And if you give up, you're not going to make it. If you don't play, you can't win. If you don't participate, you can't win. If you give up, you're never going to get there.
Right.
So these are the things I tell myself, and they may sound like platitudes, but that's all that keeps me going. I woke up so many days where I just felt depressed. I'm like, this is going to be the day that my editor is going to call, and this whole frustration period is going to end. And guess what? It happened this morning.
Yeah,
So.
well, great. No wonder you're smiling. My girlfriend says the same thing to me. She's like, you are so singularly focused. I've never met someone so focused on being a writer, and
That's what it takes.
You're so like driven to be it, and I'm like, I can't do it any other way. I don't at this because I spent. We're gonna get a little personal. I spent my first 3.5 decades not giving a shit about what happened. And I was like, yeah, I write, whatever, and I was like, I want to be a writer, but whatever.
Well, yeah, those people, if you stick with that kind of attitude, you'll never go anywhere.
So when I moved out here in my mid-30s, my Jesus year at 33, and I was like, this is my last stand. I'm gonna do my best, and I dove headfirst into my writing and all that stuff, and I feel like I'm on my way. I'll get there. I wish it was happening faster, but whatever. I'll get there, but I feel like I'm definitely heading in the right way.
Well,
but
good.
We had to go through all that stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I didn't start out knowing I was going to be a writer. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I thought I would do this, and I thought I was going to do that, and I tried multiple things, and I have other talents, and so I wasn't sure what I should do. I was in graduate school in journalism, and I'm getting an internship in the art department of Outside Magazine because I liked graphic design and photography, and I was good at it. So but what I was in school for, what was I paying tuition for?
Right.
Writing.
Yeah. You might as well follow that.
Yeah.
Right?
So, and things happen.
Yeah.
And things pop up, and you get fired, or you go into a different direction, and then you say, "Hey, do I really want this? Am I going to fight this?" Yeah, I am. And so you just got to keep fighting and
pivot, fight.
I've had so many people. This was something that came up when we were talking with this group of authors the other day. Several of us had people in our lives who basically like, you're not good at this. You're no good. You should go not do this. And we're not going to give you this deal, or we're not going to do this. And nobody's going to read this. And then a week later, and you change agents, and they sell it in a week to, and have an auction. So, I mean, just like you hear stories like that, and you just say, whoever this is, it's not the be all end all person who's going to decide what my fate is. If I believe in myself and I believe in my book or my story or whatever it is, and you want it bad enough, and you have some talent, you're not just fooling yourself.
Right.
You can get there.
You can get there.
It's it may take longer, but
and it's what I've come to learn and accept is that the editor next door to the one that rejected you probably or could have liked what you wrote, and
it depends who woke up with what happened that morning in their lives, whether they liked your thing or not. Maybe their dog died and they're just pissed off.
Right. They're rejecting everything. Yeah. No, it's such a weird, fickle world in a way. With submitting and getting published and books and things like that, and you just gotta.
You have to learn that. You have to rebound from rejection and keep going. That's all. That's the only way that I've managed to get to where I am, in order to endure more of it.
We're also masochists. All right, so last question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up with this. And I've asked this of a bunch of people, and I always get really good answers, so I'm curious. If there was one book or story or movie or anything creative you wish you wrote, what would it be?
that I'm going to write,
You
or that
wish you wrote, like something. There's a song out there or a
that
book.
somebody else wrote.
Yeah. What?
Oh,
And I know.
I think that's the same question as regret. I don't know if I can answer that.
No, I don't think so. Because I think it's more of an inspiration. Like, oh, that one. There's a lot to it that I really like about that particular thing, and I wish I could write that someday, or I hope I get to write that someday. It's more of that kind of like. I can give you examples if you'd like of what other people said.
Okay.
One person.
I don't think I'm going to be able to answer this, but
No,
go ahead.
a lot of people don't, and then they give an answer. So we'll find out. One person said "Hey Jude" by the Beatles. Another person said the Bible. Another person.
All right, Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
How's that?
I love it. Why that one?
Because you can read that book at various times in your life, and it's always a different book.
Oh, see, I think that's a great answer.
That's one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
But I don't wish I wrote it. I just think it's one of my favorite books,
Yeah.
and that will satisfy your question.
Well, you were just throwing it out there.
No,
Do you?
It's incredibly creative. It's incredibly imaginative. And like I said, it's a different book depending on your age and
Yeah.
experience
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you read it, because it
Okay.
means different things. And if you take it literally, my mother also, she has a children's literature. That's her specialty
Mm-hmm.
academically. So I don't know. I read that when I was young, and then I read it again when I was in college, and then I think I read it again later, and it was
Yeah.
like 3 different books. It
Yeah.
was just so good.
It's one of those ones. It's one of those books that, as you get older and experience life, and you learn new things in life, you can kind of relate more to certain
Right.
aspects of it.
I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to learn, but I find that I have a hard time reading books because I'm constantly editing them as I'm reading them,
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
destroyed reading for me
Yeah.
because I have to edit my own books. Most of the time, I don't have editors at these publishers. I mean, most people don't.
Mhm.
A lot of people I know are hiring editors
Okay.
and themselves,
Yeah.
even though they have a traditional publisher. So I have got this problem where I cannot enjoy a book
Because
these days because I'm editing it as I'm reading it, and I can't seem to read for pleasure. And I start a book and I'm just not that interested in it.
Yeah.
So I watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of limited series
Okay.
because there's a lot of really great storytelling in some of the way that they tell these stories and the
Mhm.
narratives of a limited series. I think I can use those same storytelling techniques
Yeah.
in the books that I'm writing. And
Yeah.
so I don't think it's a useless waste of time that I'm lazy and avoiding things. I think I'm learning how to tell stories, and I'm learning how to layer all of that intrigue and conflict and character development and, things happening and I just watched this one series, Truth Be Told, on Apple.
Okay.
And I just thought to myself, you know what? My book's not good enough. It's not complicated enough. I don't have enough conflict. Even though there's plenty of conflict, I had to go back and rethink the book that I'm currently writing because that series made me realize that I don't have enough going on of the right kind of thing. And if I want to get these books adapted and made into series, then I have to have more of that. So, I mean, I'm really thinking that way.
Yeah, you got to see what people are doing. That's
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah, and what I'm also finding is, I had a producer read my latest a novel that's under submission right now, and I've gotten some initial positive feedback. So I'm hoping, I don't know anything for sure, but that may be something that is something good happening
Yeah.
that I don't know yet. But I had this producer read it and then read the one that came after that, which no one's really seen yet except
Okay.
my beta readers. And she said, the first one was darker than I was expecting. I'll read the next one. And so she read the next one and she said, there's a really, really super high bar for limited crime series, episodic series these days. And I'm just not seeing what I need to see. So what I got from that is it's not dark enough. Like, because I asked her for examples of
Yeah.
what kind of shows and series are you talking about, or that are the kinds of ones that you're looking for, and they were all these incredibly troubled, super dark, characters, and I just thought, okay, well that's not what I'm doing, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
change what I'm doing just to fit what this one producer seems to think that she
Mhm.
wants or that she thinks,
It should be.
that's just a very small sliver, and it's going to change because it always does.
It'll-
So by the time
yeah.
I would write a novel and get it adapted, it would be
It'd be different.
It already is different, like
Yeah.
she said. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to sell those right now. So now we're looking for this other thing. So
Right.
and your thing doesn't fit that either. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep working on it, and maybe I'll find the right producer, or I'll find an editor, and I'll write the series, and
Yeah.
everything will be fine,
Yeah.
regardless of what this woman thinks.
And it probably will be.
And it probably will be,
Yeah.
because I know what I'm doing.
Right.
I've had beta readers who've given me great feedback. They didn't in the past, so I know I'm doing better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No.
And I've got assistants and people who are reading it before they get to the decision makers, and they're all liking it too. So I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
And it's proof about what you were saying is that you just stick with it.
Yep. You have to.
It's all gonna work out if you. Well, I wouldn't say it all works out, but if you just stick with
I'm
it,
hoping.
you get better.
I'm feeling pretty hopeful right now.
Good.
When I wasn't before.
Well, when this episode comes out, I'm looking forward to sharing it with good news.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
I'm hoping too.
All right. Well, Caitlin, thank you for doing this with me. I appreciate it.
It was great. Thanks.